Good afternoon. I'm Mark Kent, Director of Motorsports Competition for General Motors. We'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today here at this beautiful Michelin Tower. Also like to thank all the folks here at Road Atlanta and the Michelin team for hosting us today in this beautiful facility. Isn't it amazing? Also like to thank our partners at IMSA, Mobil 1, SiriusXM, and again Michelin, because we couldn't be here today sharing this exciting news without your long-term successful partnerships. So thank you for being part of the program. Also, I saw Scott Atherton here earlier. Scott, I'd like to thank you for your leadership as president of IMSA. This is a fantastic series, and it's because of a lot of the great things that you've done over the years. So I'd like to thank you for all of that and wish you the best of luck wherever your path leads you. And IMSA is an amazing series, and it consistently has an amazing lineup of auto manufacturers and drivers. And this is truly an exciting time, not only to be a race fan, but also to be a manufacturer competing in this series. And while 2019 was exciting, we're hoping to make 2020 even more exciting with the introduction of this beautiful Corvette C8.R on the racetrack. We'll be debuting at Daytona, the Rolex 24-hour Daytona. And there's a lot to talk about this new Corvette C8.R, far more than I could tell you, because there's a lot of people that played a huge role in the development of this car, and a lot of them are here today, and a lot of them will be available afterwards to answer any questions you may have. Joining us today is the Chief Engineer of the Corvette at Piatech, Ed Moss, the Engineering Group Manager for the Corvette structure, Vlad Kapitanov from the Performance Studio, Ben Johnson, and several key members of Corvette Racing are with us today. Doug Feehan from the Motorsports Competition team is here as well. From our Motorsports Marketing team, we have Todd Christensen, Ryan Smith, Michael Stauffer, and several others are here as well. And we're also joined by a couple of our fabulous Corvette racing drivers, Ollie Gavin and Tommy Milner. So now let's take a look at the amazing new Corvette C8.R.
It is a dream 60 years in the making. One man's vision, born on tracks the world over, honed in competition, perfected by generations of true believers. His name was Zora, the father of the Corvette. His vision was to build a mid-engine supercar, rivaling any car built anywhere, attainable by anyone who loves driving. And now, after years of competitions and checkered flags, endless days and endless nights, this mid-engine land-based missile, the most powerful, most technologically advanced machine ever to wear the cross flags, is about to race from dream to reality. Corvette C8.R, coming soon to a track near you.
How about that? The all-new Corvette C8.R. I don't know what our competition may be thinking right now, but I'm really looking forward to getting this on track next season. And while it has a new engine placement, a new color scheme, and many other new features that we'll talk about later, one of the most impressive aspects of the C8.R is the way that it was developed side by side with its production counterpart. In fact, the C8.R represents the closest linkage we have ever had between the track and the showroom of any Corvette we have ever raced in IMSA GTLM competition. To tell you more about that strong linkage between the race car and its production counterpart, I'd like to introduce Ed Piatech, Chief Engineer for the Chevrolet Corvette.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to see such interest in this car. I can tell you that I've had 30 years of product development engineering experience inside of General Motors, and this clearly is the pinnacle of my career to work on both the 2020 Stingray and the C8.R. So very exciting to be here this afternoon. I'd like to start by talking about GM's commitment to racing because it really is due largely to the connection we have between the road car and the race car. And the bottom line is when we started developing the C8 street car, there was no doubt we'd be racing that car too. And so right from the outset, we collaborated with the Corvette Racing team and the Corvette engineering team for the street car. If there's a Corvette and if there is racing, you can be sure that Corvette will be racing against the best competition in the world. And some teams come and go, seemingly dependent on the whims of a marketing strategy. And we've been very lucky to have the incredible and unwavering commitment of leaders inside of General Motors, folks like Jim Campbell, Mary Barra, Mark Royce, that have let us race Corvettes uninterrupted for 20 years. That's really unprecedented. So when we started C8, we knew we were going to race it, and we said, we may as well get working with the race team right away. The other thing I'll mention is our customers don't expect we race, they demand it. And you'll see we're going to have a great hill full of Corvettes right up here in the Corvette Corral this weekend. I think if you walk around the track, especially some of the folks that are camping, those are your hardcore race fans, you're going to see they have Corvette hats on or Corvette shirts on or Chevy shirts on. We've got a great customer base, and they understand the connection between the race car and the road car, that technology transfer that's really very tangible. So to talk a little bit more about the technology transfer, I want to talk about the fact that because we started with a clean sheet of paper, we were able to develop these cars simultaneously. And so starting back 6 years ago, when I started working on the new Corvette, we had Corvette racing engineers in the meetings with us as we laid out the basic bones of the car. Now, if you think about the historic transfer of technology from Corvette to the race car, we started with the C5 in '97, then we started racing the C5R in '99. So we took the learnings from the C5R, put them into the C6 street car, started developing the C6. So it was sort of a leapfrog serial approach. But this time, because we knew we were going to have a clean sheet of paper, mid-engine architecture, it made sense to start right from the outset with the race team involved. There's a deeper level of technology transfer than ever before here. And I can say that we have a higher percentage of production car parts in the race car than we've ever had. Nearly 100 parts, approximately 80% of them are structural. And we talk about the structures being a really important aspect of this car. I'll get into the details in a second. Now you may be asking yourselves, what's the story on going mid-engine now? Why? And I think the story for both the street car and the race car is we really reached the limits of performance with the front engine architecture. We really needed to do something revolutionary to sort of take advantage of the physics of having more of the weight of the vehicle on the driven axle. And so what we found in the street car, for those that have been following the news, is we've got a 0 to 60 in less than 3 second Stingray coming out. And a large part of that's due to that extra normal force or mass over the rear axle. I think we'll find that the race car shares similar benefits, especially when you're exiting a turn with that kind of mass on the car. To get to the structure, and again, Ed Moss is here, he can answer a lot of the questions. Because every Corvette street car is really a convertible, we don't use the roof as a load path like a lot of coupes do, because even our coupe has a removable roof panel, and we actually introduced a retractable hardtop last week in Florida. So we don't count on that. So most of the torsion and bending is carried through a very large tunnel section. It's tunnel dominant. So we use aluminum extrusions and castings, and we give the car a really stiff, strong backbone. The race car uses that too, and it helps us in the suspension optimization of keeping the tires planted on the ground. The race car also obviously has a roll cage for driver safety, but in both cases, for C8 and the 2020 Stingray, the structure is lighter and stiffer than the car that it precedes. The biggest piece of the car, and you can see this in the images here, are pieces we call high pressure die casting. So there's 6 of them. The biggest one is over a meter long, and the idea is you take this molten aluminum and you shoot it into a die at a really high velocity, and it gives you a part where it has the properties, the stiffness, the strength, but only in the places you need it. So most of it is actually cavities, but you get this really great performance. Some of the wall sections or ribs are as thin as 3 millimeters thin. And we use those on the production car to give it that great torsional performance, and we use those parts in the race car too. And if you have a chance to head up to the fan zone up on the hill, there's a neat Chevy section of the fan zone with a display. We've got what we call a rolling chassis cutaway car. You can actually see quite a bit of the structure of the car, and that same structure is carried over in the race car. I'll also mention, I was just up there, and it's one of the few places in the world you'll see a C5 C8.R, a C6R, and a C7R right in a row. So if you have a chance, you ought to head up there sometime this weekend. Beautiful cars. I think the key around taking advantage of that weight in the rear axle is if you don't have tires that utilize that extra traction, you're not going to get the performance out of it. So we've been fortunate to have a long, enduring partnership with Michelin, going back to C5R on the race car and C6 on the production car. And the best thing about working with them is we don't work with a Michelin race team and a Michelin street car team. We work with the same engineers. Lee Willard's here in the crowd, and Lee's been a great part of that partnership. And as we learned things that made the street car tires better, we could drive those into the race car and vice versa. So the new street car has an all-season tire that's capable of nearly 1 G of lateral acceleration. We'll have summer Z51 tires that are really, really high grip tires, and I think we're going to hear about some driving impressions pretty soon for the street car. I think people are going to be pretty excited about that. Another aspect of the car that we're really excited about for the street car that I think carries over into the race car is the fact that in the road car we've moved the driver about 16 inches further forward. And what this does is kind of put the driver at the center of the rotation of the vehicle. So as you turn the steering wheel, you get an immediate response. It's not watching the front of the car steer and then you feel it the seat later. And that translates to having a better sense of control of the car. Another benefit of not having the engine up front is we could lower the windshield, the cowl, and the hood to give that driver a command view right down to the road, which is great on the street, but it's really important on the track when you're trying to place the car just perfectly for an apex. I'll talk a little bit about the development of these two cars together because, again, going back 6 years, we had Corvette Racing engineers in our meetings as we were developing the street car. One of the neat tools that we had was what we call a driver in the loop simulator. So this is effectively the world's most expensive video game. I had a chance to drive it a couple times myself. And just a couple details on it. First of all, the motion platform down here, it's got 6 degrees of freedom, which means it can move up, down, sideways, and then it can roll, pitch, and yaw as well. And it can yaw, roll, or pitch up to 70 degrees a second. So it gives you real dynamic interaction. It's really immersive. We have about a 30-foot wraparound high-definition screen, and there's a Corvette cockpit in the car. And so when you're in the car, you really feel like you're driving a Corvette on a racetrack. And this allowed us to make much faster iterations in suspension tuning, aerodynamics. It's something Corvette Racing has had for years. We decided to bring it in. We have one of these at the Milford Proving Ground now. And so this is an incredible tool that we use with the help of the racing team to really get the best performance out of both the street car and the race car. I'll mention too that the design of the car started right from scratch, and before we even made a single component that we tested on track, we were using computer simulations, obviously. So we worked with Corvette Racing for things like finite element analysis, computational fluid dynamics, heat transfer, and lap time simulations, and made sure our models correlated very well so that we could find things that help the street car, translate them to the road car, and vice versa. And so we've worked really closely with Corvette Racing to make sure we had those tools, that tool chain set up, so that as we learned, we could translate the learnings. I'll mention too that our driving loop simulator has results that are within about 0.2 of a second of what an actual driver sees on our Milford road course. So the correlation there is really powerfully strong. So in the end, I'd like to say that we've developed the C8.R and the 2020 Stingray side by side with Corvette Racing, and I think the result is both cars are better for it. They've never been more connected, and I think the initial reaction to the street car has been really positive. I think everyone's reaction to the race car is going to be great too. So with that, let's take it back to Mark to talk a little bit more about the C8.R.
Thank you. How about I think Ed has the only other job in the company that I want. So let's take a look at some of the elements of the C8R. You know, as I mentioned earlier, first thing you probably noticed about the car is it features a different color scheme. As you can see, we've introduced a silver livery for 2020 on the number 4 car. The silver livery goes back to a couple iconic Corvette concept cars. It was, if you look at the 1973 Aerovette or the 1959 Stingray Racer, these are cars that push the envelope both in design and performance. So it's only fitting that we use that color on the number 4 car, which again is silver with yellow accents. But for the traditionalists, the number 3 will continue to be featuring Corvette yellow. It'll be the mirror of this car, yellow with silver accents. Again, carrying on the lineage of Corvette Racing over the last 20 years of competition. Vlad, who I pointed out earlier from the design studios, has been instrumental on the livery of the car, instrumental on the production car, working with Ed. Driver uniforms, you name it, Vlad and his team have been doing it, and he'll be around later to answer any questions you may have. Now let's talk about the engine under the hood, under the rear hatch. The engine. The C8R features a 5.5 liter normally aspirated V8 engine. It's going to produce about 500 horsepower and about 480 foot-pounds of torque. Direct injection is also going to provide more precise fuel control, enhancing the throttle control and drivability. Also unique to the race car is a rear hatch mounted air inlet that not only improves the airflow to the engine, but also provides cooling to key engine components and chassis components that are housed in the engine compartment. The C8R will feature a 6-speed sequential gearbox. It's an all-new gearbox that was developed with X-Track to not only optimize the weight distribution of the car, but also to enable the packaging of a race-specific diffuser in the back of the car. So it's an all-new gearbox that has met all of our objectives of weight distribution and packaging. Ed touched on this structure earlier by starting with the amazingly light and stiff 2020 Corvette Stingray chassis. We've been able to build a race car that is also lighter and stiffer than its predecessor, the C7R. And just like our production cars, the frames for the C8R are built at the Corvette assembly plant in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And while they are very closely aligned between the race car and the production car, there are some differences. For example, the race car did not need the room in front for extra storage. So the Corvette Racing team has instead packaged a radiator in that space, which then freed up the area where the radiators are located on the production car to package high-intensity racing lights for night racing. The neat thing about this is those lights and these lights on the race car are produced by the same people that produce the street car lights on the Corvette. You'll get to see and hear the C8R do a hot lap around the track here Saturday morning before the race. And I think you'll agree that while the car is a drastic change from its previous generation, it's still distinctively Corvette. So now I'd like to ask Chevrolet's Tommy Milner to come up. Tommy has had considerable seat time in the car already, and would like you to provide us with your thoughts on the new race car.
Thanks, Mark. It's been an honor of mine to be a part of Corvette Racing since 2011. Since they started, Corvette Racing has won 107 races, the most of any professional sports car team in North America. This includes 13 team championships and 12 driver and manufacturer titles. In 2015, Corvette Racing became the first sports car team in 15 years to win endurance racing's Triple Crown, with victories at the Rolex 24 Daytona, 12 hours of Sebring, and 24 hours of Le Mans in the same season. And I can tell you that we're just getting started. In my testing of this vehicle, I think we have something really special on our hands. With the C8R, as Ed said earlier, the driver sits more centrally located in the car, which allows us as drivers, as we're just finding understeer and oversteer in the car, we get that feedback from the car just that much faster. The car rotates around us, makes our job as race car drivers just that little bit easier, which we of course love. I'm glad you all got a chance to look at this car early. We look forward to fielding a two-car effort next year, featuring the number 3 and the number 4 Corvettes, which will debut at the Rolex 24 Daytona. Thanks.
Don't go anywhere, Tommy. We're glad you all had a chance to get an early look at this vehicle, and I'd now like to invite up to join us the subject matter experts and allow you the opportunity to take a look at the car, ask any questions that you may have. So thank you for being here today, And we look forward to seeing you here this weekend as we try to close out the 2019 season with a win for Corvette Racing. Thank you.